Welcome to Central Coast Newspapers Video News. My name is Jackie Pearson. Today we are joined by Tony Caldersmith. Tony is a member and a founding member of the Kangy Angy Residents Action Group. He has been fighting the building of the intercity train maintenance facility in basically important E2 bushland in Kangy Angy. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So we basically have to go back to the moment when Wyong Council decided to sell this land to Transport for New South Wales to bring our audience into how we got to the point where some of that land now looks like a moonscape, quote unquote. That happened just before Wyong Council was dissolved. Why do you think they sold that land?
Well, I've probably got to be a little careful here because there's some pretty involved people in the council that made that decision happen. But the railways had a program to locate their maintenance facility north of Sydney. They wanted it on a comparatively slow part of the rail because they didn't want to be moving trains on and off fast parts. And they chose north of Wyong and south of Wyee, so they wouldn't be able to go too far.
Hang on, north of Wyong and south of Wyee, that's not Kangy Angy?
No, exactly, and that's what happened. And so they had a list of 8, they came up with a list of 8 places. They chose number 1, as you would, which happened to be belonged to the Darkinjung Council. They spoke to them for a while. Darkinjung were keen to go ahead, but in the middle of the discussions they broke off contact. We've never been able to find out why. So then, instead of looking at the rest of their list, which you think you do, seeing you spent time creating it, they went to Wyong Council and said, where would you recommend? And after a little bit of discussion, Wyong Council recommended, well, the email says 3 places, 2 at Warnervale and 1 at Kangy Angy. Now, the Warnervale ones, when you read the script in the email, it basically says there are 2 here, but you shouldn't use them. So they were only recommending 1. It was Kangy Angy. Now, it was outside the railway's required area. It was on a fast rail track and totally puzzling. They accepted that. The reason the council did it, we think, was that for a long time we'd been asking the council to tidy up an old road that would give us flood-free access. And I have a letter from the mayor saying finally we're going ahead with that. And it was a reasonably expensive job. The problem is that the mayor's letter was dated 3 months after they'd already sold the railways they could have Kangy Angy.
Oh.
So there's a bit of a conflict there.
Well, that's interesting. Has anyone looked at that in detail?
I don't know. We've publicised.
Well, we'll have to come back to that. Meanwhile, unfortunately for the residents who fought hard to convince Transport for New South Wales that this was not the right place, you've had to go through compulsory acquisition and the work has now started. Can you tell me, this was your retirement destination. How has that impacted on the residents of Kangy Angy?
Well, I mean, now it's a major industrial site while they're working on it, with all the things that go with it, like dust, massive amounts of dust in the atmosphere, major trucks running around everywhere.
Are you on town water?
Yeah, no.
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 So how's the dust impacting on your tanks and your water supply?
Well, it's one of the major problems at the moment, and we were having a discussion with them only 2 days ago about some dust that they were creating, and they said, oh, we've got the water trucks there coping with this, and there are water trucks there all the time. It doesn't mean to say the dust isn't in the air,
no.
And we've got evidence of that anyway.
So then, a few weeks ago now, there was some unexpected clearing or moves to clear trees in Orchard Road that weren't in the original plan. Can you give us the narrative around what happened in Orchard Road?
Well, what happened was when they were drawing up the plans for the site, they had we'd been down to see them and about it and so on. And when it was pretty obvious that we couldn't stop them, we asked if they could tidy up an old track that the electricity guys used to use to check their wiring. It was really a goat track, but it was the locals on Orchard Road used to use that to get out when the bridge was flooded.
Ah,
And
okay.
they said, yep, they'd put it in the map, they'd include it, which they did. When it turned out the job was underway, their idea of that was going to become their road, and that they wanted to widen it out for an incredible amount, for no reason that we could think of, which included bowling over a bunch of 100-year-old gum trees and all sorts of things. And we said, don't do that. If you're not going to stop you doing that damage, we'd be happy for you not to leave the road there.
Yeah.
And oh no, it's in the plan. Once something's in the plan, that's it.
So we were sent photos of about 6 police vehicles and residents standing in front of trees, and then the Environmental Defenders Office wrote to Transport for New South Wales on behalf of the residents and stopped the removal of those trees.
That's right. It's currently at stop.
Right, it's currently at stop. What's the current status then of communication between either EDO and Transport for New South Wales, or CARAG and Transport for New South Wales?
Communications, there's not a lot of communication going on. It's quite hard to get any information, excuse me, about what's happening, other than I can tell you that at the moment they're not working on that. And that we have a note from the railway saying it's on hold while they decide what will happen. We're watching it with a hook like eyes just to make sure nothing happens until we've been involved again.
Now, tell me about this back down on the mains water and sewer.
Well, in the original discussions, and there was substantial documentation went out, if you've ever seen it, it's massive.
Yes.
Part of the concession for them going there was that they would, you will be getting, it was described, you will be getting mains water and
Yeah,
sewer.
I remember reading that.
Right, and but now when we approached the contractors about it, they said we don't know anything about that. And when we approached the railways, they said, oh no. My discussion with the railways, and the gentleman said to me, no, we won't be doing that. We will be having water to the new maintenance facility. If you want water, you talk to the council.
Oh, gee, that's another kick, isn't it? And what has the council said?
Council are sort of qualifying their bets at the moment.
Right.
We don't have a
Okay.
decision out of that.
Now, most of us who move to the coast do so because of its beauty. And I would argue that there are many, many pockets that are just like Kangy Angy, exquisite, peaceful, lovely, semi-rural communities.
Absolutely.
You've explained to me how the state government was able to actually take land classified environmental and clear it without a great deal of consideration for not only the existing community, but also this is flood storage land, isn't it? And
Sure.
they have to raise the land to get it so that it works, basically.
Well, there's a lot of work to do to
Yeah.
make sure they alleviate flooding on their
So
side.
how is it that the state government, Tony, is allowed to do this on E2 land with acknowledged endangered ecological communities present?
Well, there's a provision in the state laws which allows them to override E3 and E2 rules for what's called critical infrastructure.
Right.
And so if you're the railways or somebody, you get your a particular project labelled as critical infrastructure, and it's free for you. You can go for your life.
So of all the E2 and E3 land around the coast, there's potential for the same thing to happen? I know a possibility.
I guess that would depend entirely what's called critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it's based on, and railways have a pretty good hold on critical infrastructure.
Now, I've also had it explained to me that this is flood storage, and incredibly we find out this work occurring in drought. But I have been shown photos from Kangy Angy in flood conditions, and I've also walked along Bangalow Creek and seen how much fill is going to be required to get this facility to a workable level. Can you just explain the area that you think could be impacted by flood due to this facility being built where it is?
Well, the problem with the area is it's very critically balanced from a flood point of view. It starts with the creek being absolutely at its limit, so that any really heavy rain periods back the creek up, and in fact they back it right back up to the university. And the university have had some concerns about that already. Now, we know that 2007, for instance, the major floods there, I lost a car in that, basically had to, standing on the roof of my car, I had to swim ashore, if you like. That came up almost level with the high points of Orchard Road, flooded all the back properties along behind Orchard Road. And that was when the water could get away. Now, but some of it was absorbed on the top of the hill before. Now that won't happen, of course, because all that will be hard standing, and that water will just flow over the top of that and straight down and put a big load on the creek.
And where does Bangalow Creek meet the lake? It's Chittaway, isn't it?
Chittaway, basically, yes.
So, which is also flood prone.
Yes.
So, following that creek line, this could have consequences on communities all the way from Chittaway to Lisarow.
Oh, yes. Oh, everywhere from the university right out to the lake.
And it may take 20 months or 20 years for us to see the consequences of this.
Yes, well, we don't know. I mean, it'll all depend on how much rain we get and how heavy it is and for what period, but it doesn't take much to get that up and running.
So the other thing that is interesting is that the approved plan versus the implementation of that plan seems to be a bit of a movable feast. And the flexible, and the residents don't seem to be informed.
Well, there is no real communication system. Yes, the current contractor has a young man who's supposed to be our contact. He has no authority for anything, so anything you ask him or get him involved in, he has to take it back, naturally enough, to his management. And then they flick past it back to the railways. The contractor cannot make any decisions without getting railways approval.
Okay.
So it's a pretty involved process. We had a little discussion the other day with some problems with one of the residents, and they were creating some dust, and it was getting onto their property, which meant getting on their roofs, getting into their water systems, and we got the young lad down. And he basically said, I've got to go back and see my boss, and he'll see the railways, and they'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's very convoluted, and it's all tucked away. You can't get at the system at all.
And my understanding is that this is part one, and that there could actually be a second stage to this project in 5 years' time that would make it even bigger.
Well, that's pretty much up in the air. The first part that they need to add is an exit line which goes out so that the trains won't be backing back down onto the main line. It's not shown on any or on most of the plans, but if you get a right copy of a plan, you can see that they are intending to exit north. Mm-hmm. Yes, what they have to do after that, I think, will determine how well this works. But it's a difficult site to work on. They're finding that's difficult, and it's hard to see how they can expand it very much.
It just, of all the issues I've covered in my 3 years at the paper, this seems to be the most absurd. It's just not, it doesn't pass the reasonable person test.
No.
But it appears that we're going to get this train maintenance facility. What is Carag now hoping for as the best possible outcome for the residents?
Well, the best we can do is protect the residents' interests, like the dust-free situations, good access, keep the roads good and tidy after they've finished.
Get your water and get your mains water and electricity.
Not necessarily everybody wants it, but I think from a point of view, there'll be a number of people say, well, we're going to move out, we won't be able to stand this. And if you can say to other people who don't understand living off tank water that it's got mains water, that's an improvement.
Yes.
I mean, frankly, I'm happy not to pay anybody to supply my water, but I can see that if somebody wanted to move in and they weren't used to being on tank-free, tank water, they'd see that as an advantage to have mains water.
Okay.
So there are things like that could be done. But I mean, we opened that discussion up very early, and they said, yes, we'll do it. Now you find they're backing down. I mean, I think that's pretty constable. You shouldn't be doing it.
No. All right. Well, thank you, Tony, for bringing us up to date with what's going on at Kangy Angy. I know that a lot of the broader community are concerned and are watching with a great deal of interest to see how things play out. So thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.